Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank Dr. Warmack, Dr. Adams-Gaston, Dr. Artis, and Dr. Martin for participating in today's panel discussion. Thank you for all that you're doing to educate our next generation of leaders and for all that you're doing to drive change across our great country. I also want to thank Judy Gatson of WIS News for moderating. This should be a very thoughtful discussion, and I look forward to hearing what these leaders have to say. It's been a little more than a year since many Americans, galvanized by outrage at violence against African Americans, took to the streets to protest social injustice. It was a humbling and powerful moment for the country, and certainly for us at Dominion Energy. Within the company, those protests sparked candid conversations about race and social justice, and they spurred action, from announcing a new personal employee holiday to honor Juneteenth, to creating a $5 million social justice fund, to the HBCU Promise. While those particular initiatives are new, our commitment to HBCUs is not. Likewise, our commitment to social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion is not new. That commitment is driven by our core values, especially our value of ethics, which embodies our belief that everyone has the right to be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect, and that everyone has a duty to treat others the same way. We also know that equity, diversity, and inclusion are good for business. They make us a stronger company. They make us more competitive. They enable us to serve our customers better. In the past few years, we've sharpened our focus on diversity and sharpened our focus on how to make progress. We've raised our diverse hiring rate from 27% in 2013 to 50% last year, and we're ahead of that pace for this year. More than half our senior leadership team is diverse, and we've set goals for workplace representation to measure our progress. We're proud of where we're headed, but we know we can do more, and we're certainly not satisfied. I expect today's discussion will inform those efforts, and I look forward to the continuing dialogue. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judy Gatson. I'm an anchor with WIS Television, and I am honored and delighted to moderate this forum with our dynamic HBCU leaders this afternoon. Before we get into our discussion, though, I just want to thank Dominion Energy and the president, chair, and CEO, Mr. Bob Blue. Technology is great when it works, right? But we appreciate you bearing with us because the message that Dominion Energy has to share is so important in the support that they have invested in the HBCU Promise. So we thank Dominion Energy, Mr. Blue, and the entire HBCU Promise initiative for the tremendous impact that it is having on HBCUs, particularly here in South Carolina. With that, let me make brief introductions. We want this forum this afternoon to be dynamic, to be engaging. I want you to hear from these leaders because it really does take a unique brand of leadership and vision and dedication and commitment to lead an HBCU. So the leaders that you will hear from this afternoon have a lot of insight, valuable insight to share about 1 year later, how our HBCUs have weathered the storm, not just of the pandemic, but of the many important issues facing us on the social justice landscape. So let me give brief introductions, and then I'll ask each of them to make brief remarks to kind of set the table for our forum today. We are delighted to have with us Dr. Harold L. Martin from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in North Carolina A&T. Also, Dr. Rosalind Clark Artis, who I have to mention celebrated a birthday this week, from Benedict College. I know we have some Tigers joining us this afternoon. Dr. Dewan J. Warmack from Claflin University, and also delighted as well to have Dr. Javon Adams-Gaston from Norfolk State University. So let me thank all of you for your time. Let me thank all of you for your leadership and all that you invest in preparing our HBCU graduates to lead and succeed. If you would each be so kind as to offer just brief, about 2 minutes or less, in terms of your opening remarks about what you hope people will get out of this dynamic forum today. Dr. Martin, we'll start with you.
Thanks very much, Judy, and certainly good afternoon to all my colleagues and all of those who are listening to our conversation today. I'm excited to be a part of this exceptional panel discussion sponsored by our colleagues at Dominion Energy and the investments being made in our institutions. We hope our colleagues who are on this WebEx conversation with us will get from our university representatives today a great sense of the exceptional work that's going on across the landscape of historically Black colleges and universities, the engagement in a growing population of outstanding students who are benefiting from an educational experience on our campus, and the framework and culture we have created that continues to uplift these students, help them understand and appreciate the voices they have as they contribute to social justice discussions across our landscape, but also how we have assisted our students in dealing with continuing their educational aspirations in the midst of one of the worst pandemics in our world's history, as we talk about our universities and the great work we continue to do. So I look forward to sharing more about our university's work as well.
Dr. Martin, thank you so very much. Up next, Dr. Clark Artis.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you to our colleagues and friends at Dominion Energy. Always a pleasure to see you as well, Judy, and my colleagues. It is certainly my hope today that we'll have an opportunity to explore and to amplify the unique and special value of our nation's historically Black colleges and universities, our various responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, the structural racism and our response to that on these special campuses, how we equip and prepare our students to go out into a world that does not always reflect them with any specificity. I think our institutions are uniquely positioned to make a substantial contribution. We are minority suppliers of talent, of human capacity, of brain power, and intellectual acumen. We are uniquely positioned to be an important part of the nation's solution to the complex problems, the responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the dismantling of systemic and institutionalized racism. So I'm very excited to participate in this conversation, share some of the exciting work that we're doing at Benedict College, and to learn actually from my colleagues and to exchange with each of you. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Up next, Dr. Wormack.
As I have trouble unmuting. Thank you so much, Judy. I really appreciate it. And I am honored to be on this panel with my colleagues, outstanding colleagues who are doing transformational work at our HBCUs. And I just want to thank Dominion Energy for their investment into our HBCUs and believing in the work that our HBCUs have been doing over a sustained amount of time. And so it is my hope that during this dialogue, we can continue to highlight what HBCUs have meant to the United States, not just in the post George Floyd era. You know, if you think about HBCUs educate 50% of African-American teachers, 40% of African-American health professionals, 70% of African-American dentists and physicians, and 80% of the judges are educated through HBCUs. So once again, to tell the HBCU story and continue to have the commitment and outstanding work that is happening at all of our institutions be shown. Thank you.
We're delighted to have you with us today. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Adams Gaston.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be with my HBCU president colleagues, because we're doing the work that really matters to this country. As you think about all the things that Dr. Wormack said, as well as the other presidents, one of the things you can use to contextualize that is we're 4% of the higher education institutions. So that kind of production is really, as we call it, punching above our weight all the time. I am pleased to be the 7th president at Norfolk State University, the largest HBCU in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But what really matters, the work that we do, is where cultural context connects with innovation to create transformative excellence. And that's what you get when you bring these students to your organizations. I always say we have to start with internships, and mostly we need paid internships for all of our students. And then we really know that 67% of those who intern will get a job offer. So it's a pipeline, and we want to create that pipeline, continue that pipeline, and ensure that when our students get there, not only do they have the opportunity for cultural context, but that the organizations that they end up being in are also working on that very issue.
Outstanding. What a great way to set the table for the conversation today. And we want to dive into a lot of those topics, as many as we can. And for everyone joining us on the forum this afternoon, thank you for being here as a part of this discussion about HBCUs 1 year later, really reflecting on how our HBCUs have not only weathered the storm of the pandemic, but how they have accepted the leadership and the challenges with the social justice issues that we are facing. And so the issues that the presidents have laid out, we're hoping that you will engage in submitting those questions. We'll cover as many of your questions as we can, but we want to start with the students. We always keep the focus on the students, right? And we gave them an opportunity to submit questions to the president of their university. So we're going to start with our first question for Dr. Adams Gatson, and it comes from a Norfolk State student, Mr. Cordell Farley. Take a listen.
Good evening, Dr. Gaston. My question to you will be, as president of Norfolk State University and just as a person, how did you deal with the pressure and responsibility of ensuring the safety of faculty and students on campus? Thank you for your answer. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Cordell, for that question, and thank you for being a part of the Spartan family. We are so pleased with all that you are doing and your success here. I want to be honest with you. The pandemic was not easy. It was an unprecedented, and I say people use that term so much, nobody wants to use it anymore, but it truly was nothing like we have ever seen before. If you think of the last time there was a pandemic, at least 100 years ago, and still thinking about this being a worldwide pandemic and really stopping in our tracks what we were doing. What I am pleased with is how the university came together, the faculty, the staff, the students, and made this a culture of care here at Norfolk State University so that we could do the things we needed to do. So the pressure was on. We started about March 2020 in the spring semester, just as you guys were coming back from spring break, and we had to make a decision. And that decision was that most of our students would need to return to home. We do have students for whom this university is their home. So we knew that we needed to ensure that they were safe and that they were able to be here. But most of our students had to leave. But also think about our faculty. Faculty were teaching in their classrooms, doing lab work, connecting with students, and suddenly we asked them to pivot almost on a dime from being in the classroom to doing all of this work electronically. So let me say a couple of things about things that are continue to be social injustices that we have to look at. Our institution is about 1.3 miles from where I first lived when I was coming to the university. It's a lovely, lovely campus. I live on the campus and I love it. But we don't have 5G infrastructure on this side, so to speak, of the tracks. And that creates digital divide, both for the university, and we already had issues with our students, some of whom did not have laptops or their own laptops. They were trying to do things on their cell phone. And so we distributed laptops and iPads, and we distributed hotspots because students didn't have them. So there was a lot of pressure around how do you build while you're flying the airplane that gets you out of the pandemic, that lifts you above the pandemic. And so we continue to really work with our faculty, allow them to do some training that we had in place. We worked with our student population, making sure that they had the materials that they needed, making sure that we were upgrading what we could do to upgrade our IT while we really put the pressure on the FCC. And I sat on a panel with one of our commissioners to say, this is not acceptable. We have to do better. As a nation, it means that we have unfair injustice. And I know that that's not where we want to go. So
Well,
I will applaud our university because our students, our faculty and staff did really well through COVID. Our positivity rate was 0.01 and 0.012 when the students came back in the fall. And we continue to move forward. We are Spartans, we are strong, and we are connected in a way that says, as a team, we can change these things that are out there that may hold us back, that may give unfair disadvantage, but that we never let be in the way of excellence.
Well, I appreciate the insight that you provide there, because that was really the thing about the COVID-19 pandemic, that it requires leaders to really be specific in the response, because what works for Norfolk State University might not be the same solution for Claflin or for North Carolina A&T, and it might be a completely different situation at Benedict. So the willingness to look at the unique challenges that you're facing and to meet your students and faculty where they are based on the environment and even the level of disease spread was critical to the success, I know, of all of our HBCUs. And I hope we will be able to talk more about that digital divide as we not only reflect on 1 year later, but look at what will be required for success moving forward. Dr. Adams-Gaston, thank you so much. Our next question comes from a young leader at North Carolina A&T. So Dr. Martin, this is for you from student Jordan Young. Take a listen.
Good afternoon, Chancellor Martin. I am Jordan Young, a junior marketing student from Chesapeake, Virginia. And my question for you is, with campus moving back to a sense of normalcy in the fall, what do you foresee as best practices moving forward and continuing post-pandemic? For example, we transitioned to a virtual career fair this year instead of having our normal in-person career fair. Do you think that is something that will stay in place, or will it fall by the wayside once we're through the pandemic?
Thanks very much, Jordan, and hopefully your summer is going well for you as well. A great question related to a host of activities that we had to, as part of our contingency plans for the school year. As you're aware, we were open for the full year, face-to-face instruction with a blend of hybrid instruction with online instruction as well. Because of the high levels of COVID virus spread across the nation as a whole, but certainly here in North Carolina, we moved a variety of our goods and services, advisement, career services, delivery of healthcare services to many of our students to virtual. Many of our meetings were held virtual as well, so that we could ensure that we were protecting our faculty, staff, and our students. We found that many of these services that were created in a virtual space have served us well. And as we are preparing to move back to a full engagement of our university this fall 2021, we expect to continue some of these very best practices as we move into the fall. We will continue to provide a blend of face-to-face courses as well as online instruction to allow our students to have choices so that they may be able to continue their education experiences as healthily and safely as they and their families deem are appropriate for them. We will continue to provide support and services in a very significant way virtually to support students' ongoing needs for mental health, for advice and counsel from our faculty and staff, to our health center, collaborations across our university. Faculty office hours were stood up in a virtual way. These have worked out exceedingly well with our students, and much more time with our faculty to a virtual setting, but they will also have access, for example, to face-to-face advice and counsel and engagement as well. High percentages of the nation's organizations like Dominion Energy are coming to our campus and seeking our graduates in record numbers. So the growth of our career fair has blossomed to a level that while we have one of the largest career fairs in our state as a whole, face-to-face, we're also realizing that to accommodate the continuing face-to-face career fairs on our campus will return to norm in the fall and throughout this year, because it brings a host of corporate partners and their executives to our campus, who not only recruit our students, but also working in partnership through advisory groups with each of our colleges and the advisory boards of those colleges to shape curricular expectations, continue to frame ways that we're ensuring that we're intentionally preparing our graduates for the marketplace and success in those organizations as well. But we are also creating additional direct career fairs for specialty areas, a career fair for teacher education majors, a career fair for health sciences majors, because those are very different in expectations around the broader career fair that draws a range of organizations to our campus. Those are some of the areas that allow us to ensure that we're continuing to engage with our campus, engage with our students, engage with our student populations for employment opportunities, but also the incredible amount of work we do with the community in ensuring that we are transforming and providing solutions to our faculty and staff and our students in uplifting the community that we serve as well. And we'll say more about that throughout this conversation today as well.
Absolutely. And we look forward to that. You know, you talk about the virtual career fairs. You're so grateful to still have that resource available. But, you know, you think about that person, that face-to-face engagement. Nothing is quite like it. It's hard for that to translate in a virtual forum. So it's difficult sometimes to strike that balance. I do appreciate, Dr. Martin, you bringing up the issue of mental health, because as we look at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that minority communities have been impacted far greater than other communities. And that means that our students at HBCUs have dealt with a lot of loss, a lot of illness, even still grieving the death of family members as they come back on campus. So that will be a critical issue for us to embrace and provide key support. And it gives us the perfect segue to our next question, which is for our president at Claflin University. So Dr. Wormack, you have this question from your Claflin student, Victoria Hudson. Take a listen.
Hi, my name is Victoria Hudson, and I attend Claflin University. My questions go out to President Wormack. Can mental health be focused more in classes? Every now and then, can a professor take time out of a class to allow students to breathe or catch up on work or anything involving helping mental health?
So Dr. Wormack, talking about incorporating some of these concepts of mental health in classes. I know there's a curriculum we've got to follow, but that's an interesting idea. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's an amazing idea. And thank you, Victoria Hudson, for that question. And I think COVID-19 forced us all to reimagine and rethink how we deal with mental health. Then specifically in the African-American community, I remember when COVID first hit, my entire focus was the students' well-being, students' well-being, students' well-being. And I was in a meeting with the faculty, and a faculty member made a statement and stated, you know, Dr. Wormack, we're so grateful that you're committed to the students' well-being, but not once have I heard you say, what about our mental health? And what does this mean for us? We've had to pivot on a dime. We've had to go home. We're managing children. We're managing our kids virtually, and we're still expected to provide a certain level of excellence to the students here at Claflin University. And for me, it helped me put it in perspective. A faculty member said to me, I am tired, both mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. And so we put a strategic plan together to really begin to provide resources for that. So not just in the class where students can have that time for mental health breaks, but we've invested a significant amount of dollars into telehealth. And for us, it was a significant financial investment, but it made sense for us because we've seen our utilization jump 75%. Oftentimes our students are able to use this for medical purposes. When they couldn't come to campus, they're able to get different prescriptions. They're able to talk now. And what we are able to see is the time frames where students are utilizing this, where oftentimes when our mental health counselor is not on campus. And so the utilization has been amazing. But the last piece is the health coaching around mental health and physical health, and how those two things are incorporated. So as we're reading some of the analytics that's coming back from this telehealth, it's been more than worth the investment. So Ms. Hudson, we are not just in the classroom, we're thinking about it holistically, and it's 24/7, 7 days a week, where students can have the opportunity to take advantage of it. So once we saw the success from students, now it's open to everyone on campus, faculty, staff, and students, and family members. And so we've invested in that to ensure that mental health is imperative. As we've heard numerous times, I say that, the sort of healthcare crisis in this country is a social justice issue, right? When you see African Americans are dying at a significantly higher rate than any other race to COVID-19, we have to ask the why. And we have, in rural South Carolina, we have food deserts. We have communities with, as colleague Dr. J stated, we have no bandwidth, no paved roads in some of these communities. So thinking about the mental health aspect that comes behind that. And to Ms. Hudson's last piece of that, when a student emailed me, and I think around end of April, early May of 2020, and we were trying to figure out getting all of the equipment to the students to make sure that they can have the things that was needed. But we found out the student was one of 8, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, mom, dad, and 7 other siblings. And dad had contracted COVID, mom contracted COVID, and still with this expectation for the students still to perform because they couldn't be in the house because they had to quarantine, and just some of the challenges that these 18 to 22-year-olds had to face on top of the challenging, rigorous curriculum that we offered. And so that mental health component has become one of the major focal points for us, and that investment into that. So I think that's an area that not just HBCUs, but all institutions as a whole have to pay very close attention to, because our students need it.
Wow, Dr. Ormack, thank you so much for that. I appreciate you, number one, being the type of leader who is open to that feedback, where your faculty feels like they can come to you and say, wait a minute, that's all well and good that we're focused on one thing, but we need you to hear us on this issue too. And for you to acknowledge that and take action to address those concerns surrounding mental health. And I want to thank Victoria for her great question and suggestion, because even once you make those resources available, as you mentioned about telehealth and all of those other services, we still have a stigma to overcome in our community about accepting that help, right, when it's available. And so maybe Victoria's idea of instituting or implementing that in classes so that everyone is participating will help break through some of that stigma, so that we all feel more comfortable engaging in that space and are able to support our students in a more meaningful and substantive way. Dr. Womack, thank you so very much. I want to let everyone joining us in the forum know that we're going to get to your questions in just a moment. We have some great questions coming in, but as I promised, our students up first. That leads to our final student question for now. Although you guys can submit questions if you're joining us online, give a shout out to your HBCU, how they have prepared you to lead and succeed. But Dr. Clark Artis, this question is for you, and it comes from Benedict Tiger, Ashley Reeves. Take a listen.
Hi, my name is Ashley Reeves, and I attend Benedict College in South Carolina, and I will be a senior for the upcoming school year. And my question is, with everything attempting to return back to normal, what are regards to upholding that 21st century value of education for the benefit of students? Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. What a great question. And it's nice to see you even virtually. We look forward to welcoming you back fully in August. What a wonderful way to frame our conversation today as we think about what a 21st century education looks like. As we return to normalcy, there will be an incremental approach on the campus of Benedict College. It is not a light switch. COVID is not simply over. We still have to take the necessary safety precautions. So we will continue to utilize multiple modalities, some hybrid learning, some online, some in person, to give our students the very best education possible. But those specific elements of a 21st century education, high quality 21st century education, would include technology-driven education. While we have not historically been known as an online institution at Benedict College, COVID-19 really forced us beyond our comfort zone to really adopt new technologies that we have found actually work reasonably well. And so while we are not transitioning to an online institution, we do recognize that the workforce demands that our students be well prepared and tech savvy. That doesn't just mean your smartphones. That means the ability to use technology effectively to solve complex problems, to consume and distill and disaggregate big data, to think about, to think critically about the issues of the day. And so technology will continue to be a critical component of your education here at Benedict College. Secondly, I believe 21st century education calls on our students to be global citizens. Certainly, COVID-19 resulted in our really stopping our efforts as it relates to study abroad opportunities, international exchange opportunities, but we've seen some virtual opportunities that present themselves, and our first student is now abroad again after COVID-19. And so we will be re-engaging with the global community and really pushing hard on our international exchange experiences. We believe that's one of the best ways for our young people to really grow globally and internationally and begin to be exposed to a much broader context. And that's part of that quality education for us. And finally, with partners like Dominion, we really want to double down on those internships, job shadowing experiences, and exposures in the workplace. We know that many of our students have not had the depth of experience necessary for them to be as successful as they can be. They absolutely can be if given these opportunities. So some technology-driven learning, global learning and study abroad experiences, and in-depth approaches to partnerships and internship development will all be a part of the 21st century high-quality education on the campus of Benedict College.
Dr. Artis, thank you so very much. So many great topics for us to really use as a jumping off point as we open up the forum now to some of our questions from those of you who are joining us today. Some great questions coming in, so keep sending them in. We'll cover as many as we can in our time this afternoon. We have a little less than an hour left, so let's go ahead and jump in. Our first question, Dr. Martin, I'm going to come back to you with this one. How would you define social justice and also equity? This is a big conversation that we're hearing on the national landscape, but we find that when we talk about, for example, different concepts like defund the police, right? Some people mean to reallocate the way that police departments, are using their funds, but other people really mean defund and dismantle the police. So we have to start a conversation when we talk about social justice and equity in the context of our HBCUs and where we are 1 year later. How do you define those two very important concepts, Dr. Martin?
Thanks very much, Judy. We have lots of discussions on our campus, have historically, and certainly following the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, a conversation through our communications I sent to all of our constituents, our faculty, staff, our board, and in particular our students, defining for them the atrocity through this unfortunate situation. But it was also an opportunity to say to our constituency that as a land-grant institution and heavily engaged in social justice, civil rights conversations historically, we needed to continue to frame the level of discussions we wanted to have. We didn't want our students to just simply be protesting to engage simply in a conversation about policing, as you suggest. Social justice is more than simply policing, although it's a big part. We also are missing the fact that there are just huge gaps in wealth in America. There are huge gaps in education, healthcare, unemployment, for wealth creation in our communities that we also wanted to keep before our students in our campus community as we talked about these subjects as well, so that we are enabling and engaging our students to participate in protests and in policy discussions and broader conversations in an informed way. So social justice is focusing on those areas where there are simply inequities in employment and deployment of opportunity for all, irrespective of race, ethnicity, agenda, or sexual orientation. Diversity in its finest ensures that everyone has access to similar opportunities in our great nation. Equity, on the other hand, is a form of investments, that there is consistency in resource investments, whether it be equity in pay for equal employment contributions, whether it be investments strategically in our communities, As an example, our university is in East Greensboro, the minority side of town. You will find in most all urban communities, there are minority sides of town and the non-minority side of town. There is inequity in the way taxpayer dollars are invested in creating and uplifting the minority side of town. I'm sure if I were in Norfolk, I'd see the same thing. So when we talk about social justice, we talk about the gaps in ensuring that there is fairness and opportunity on the side of equity. We're talking about investments, equal pay
Right.
for equal work, et cetera. And so we frame that as very critical discussions that we engage in a very significant way on our campus.
Thank you so much for that powerful insight. We're getting some great questions in live from our audience watching. Again, thank you all so much for being a part of this dialogue this afternoon. Sometimes when I'm moderating these forums, it feels like we're, kind of preaching to the choir. We have an audience of people who care about these things, but I really believe that these forums that Dominion Energy has held as a part of the HBCU Promise will ignite some meaningful change in our communities and for our HBCUs. So we appreciate you being a part of the dialogue and the conversation as we talk about that social justice issue that Dr. Martin just explained so eloquently. I have to throw in that my pastor over at Brooklyn Baptist Church would say, a protest, as we, see the students getting involved in protests, but a protest without action is called a parade. So we need to be very mindful about what action we want to engage in and follow up on raising our voices. How are we going to use our minds, our hands, to really be a part of the solution? So we'll come back to that subject in just a moment. I want to get to this live question coming in. And I think that it was Dr. Adams Gadsden who brought this issue up initially. I'd like to hear from each of you on this because it is such an important topic. And if we can keep it to about a minute each. But Dr. Adams Gadsden, I'm going to start with you because the question coming in is about the digital divide, which you touched on, not having 5G at the campus there. And the question is this: for those listening in who are not as familiar, can the HBCU leaders please share more about the digital divide? And I'd like to frame that answer, if we could, by not only what the major challenge is, whatever the biggest challenge that creates for you on your campus, but maybe even issuing a challenge to state leaders and other stakeholders about how they can help you address it. Dr. Adams Gadsden?
Thank you very much. And absolutely, the digital divide is alive and well. And it is not only in our campus, and I think to Dr. Martin's point, where our campuses are located are often in places where individuals in the surrounding community have a lower SES or less opportunities. So it's not just the campus, it's the whole digital divide for a community. And so my goal is to ensure that this side of the city gets the support that it needs. And gaining traction with our local community in terms of our city council, our mayor, but it has to be at a national level also. It has to be that the country decides that everybody, whether they're in rural areas or whether they're in urban areas. And I think a lot of times when people think about lack of services, they think that that only happens in the rural areas, but it happens right in the urban centers where people don't have the ability to have internet, or they don't have the ability to have internet at the same level that others have, that they don't really understand that the substructure, the infrastructure that needs to be there is not in those areas. And we are doing a deep disservice in our country if we don't help change that for everybody's sake. We have to level the playing field. You asked the question about equity. That's what equity would be: leveling the playing field, not having some people start at the start line and some people 10 yards behind and some people 50 yards behind. We've got to get everybody at the same level starting place.
Wonderful insights. Dr. Wormack, let me go to you and ask that question. What is the biggest challenge that the digital divide creates for the students at Claflin University, and your challenge to stakeholders to help bring about a solution?
Thank you. And I think that is was the most enlightening thing for me moving to South Carolina. So I've been here less than 2 years, and I moved from an urban city. And so I didn't recognize my own privilege. And so in the midst of the pandemic, I received an email from a student that was less than 20 miles from my campus, who lived less than 20 miles. And she said, "It is our prayer that Claflin's passion for education aligns with his compassion." She said, "I drive 16 miles each day to sit in a local McDonald's parking lot to use their Wi-Fi because where I live, we don't have bandwidth or the opportunity to be able to do it." And so I hit the roof. I called my staff. I said, "Why don't we send her a hotspot? Why didn't we send her a laptop?" And they said, "It wouldn't matter because where she lives doesn't even have bandwidth." And to be that close to the campus, it blew my mind. And so when you talk about digital divide at its core, and you put that in rural America and what comes behind that in this space. And the young lady said, "I'm typing my research paper on my iPhone, and I'm spending this amount of hours sitting in this McDonald's parking lot because everything is closed to use their Wi-Fi." And at that point, it blew my mind to know that the digital divide was that significant and that close to my college campus. And so we've been in numerous conversations with our Congressman Clyburn, and it's something that he believes in and recognizes that through this I-95 corridor and a major issue that is there. But for me, I didn't recognize my own privilege because I didn't have those challenges, right, coming from there. And so we were able to do that. And I'm excited now, the young lady, when you think about companies like Dominion and their investments, why they matter, right? Because we were able to use for some of the investments to provide experience for the student that they can have. And this student, with that type of commitment and grit, has gone on now, is in a full PhD program in molecular biology at Yale, fully funded. But I say all of that to say she had that grit and commitment to drive that 16 miles to sit in the parking lot for 4 hours. That's what our HBCUs produce. That's the type of student that you want at your company or within your organization. So she didn't let that hindrance from that digital divide and the challenges there to stop her. She knew she had a major focus, but she only asked us. She didn't ask for anything special. She just asked that our passion for learning aligned with our compassion as she's working through those challenges. And so for me, I think it's that's a testament of what our HBCUs do every day, and the type of students with the resilience and the commitment that they have to go on to do transformational work. And so I think the digital divide, and this was allowed me to get, laser focused on that challenge here in the state of South Carolina, and very specifically in rural communities.
Listen, Dr. Womack, you're giving me goosebumps over here, telling these stories about that dedication and passion. And that is the HBCU story. That's what we need more of, to have those resources to inspire all of our students to fulfill that potential that we know they have and that they're willing to invest the determination to achieve, but they need the resources. They've got to have the resources and the tools to be able to achieve. We're getting some great questions in for specifically for some of our presidents. I'm going to get to those in just a moment, but on this issue of digital divide, I need to hear briefly from Dr. Artis and also from Dr. Martin. Dr. Artis, I'll come with you because you've been so instrumental in serving on different committees that the governor has held in terms of how we use pandemic funds that are coming in, kind of one-time money, right? How would you like to see us use those funds to address the digital divide?
So I think Dr. Womack has made an excellent series of points, and we share a marketplace. All of South Carolina is rural. We may be in a capital city, but the reality is 12% of Benedict College students do not have access to any form of broadband technology, which means we are reduced to being a correspondence school or risking excluding an entire population of students from an educational opportunity, and that's just unacceptable. We are one of 8 states in the nation that does not have a comprehensive broadband strategy, and that hinders us from accessing the federal dollars that are available to enhance that infrastructure. And so I think we have to get serious. This is a civil rights issue of the day. We have to agitate, educate, empower, engage, and really push these conversations. It is a travesty to imagine a young person trying to learn, particularly in the midst of a global pandemic, and simply not able to access technology, so functionally excluded. And I think we have miles to go in this issue, on this issue, and I think it takes political will. From the national level all the way down to the state and local level, there has to be a will to include and to engage and to recognize that everyone deserves access to opportunity, equity. That's really what it's all about. So we're working hard. We're making a lot of noise, I think, here in South Carolina. Obviously, the governor worked with us to provide a series of Apple laboratories in what would be arguably digital deserts around the state of South Carolina, which are going to be located in environments where students have the least access. Unfortunately, again, without that broadband technology, even a mighty Apple computer is a brick if there's nothing for it to connect to. So we have got to continue really advocating for digital equity across the board for all of our students in our nation.
Thank you so much. Dr. Martin, I'm going to put this in question to you before we get to our questions from our audience. You guys keep sending the questions in. We still got a good bit of time here where we can cover a lot of ground. But Dr. Martin, as you look at our theme of 1 year later and look at what you hope to accomplish as we pull out of this pandemic, how would you like to see us use resources to address the digital divide?
I would say echo all the key points my colleagues have already made, but I think it's critically important to recognize the digital divide has been there for quite some time. I think the pandemic brought it to the surface and exacerbated the challenges because so much of our engagement moved virtually, K-12, universities and the like. And it has had a profound impact on high percentages of universities who serve low-income students, which represents all HBCUs, as well as rural communities where many of our HBCUs, quite honestly, are located. And so we clearly have to address this critical issue, as my colleague, Dr. Artis, made reference to. It is a civil rights issue. It really is. But as I've shared with our local constituency, our congressional leaders as well, is that it not only has an impact on broadening the gaps in social justice areas, wealth and education and health and et cetera, it also has a direct impact on families and parents and their ability to gain access to information. Telehealth is going to become a more and more important issue in our communities. Lacks opportunity to educate these families around enhancing their skills online, but also seeking employment online. Many of the services, social services, are offered virtually, for example. So our families are going to, post-pandemic, even more so be isolated from these opportunities because more services are going to be virtual and the like. And we have to make this a resounding top priority with our local and federal leaders for strategic investments. I'm pleased to see President Biden including broadband enhancements as part of his infrastructure initiative. The congressional leaders who represent various states also speaking about, even with relief funds, a high percentage of these dollars being made available for us to not only support our students, but also engage as partners with our school districts in our regions to help elevate those school districts as well. We have significant amounts of work to do in this space, but I also suggest that our HBCUs are going to have to continue to step up in this space as well, because the deployment of resources that will flow, both state and federal, will come through our universities, must come through our universities, and we must have the talent to ensure that we are seeing outcomes that are transformative in the communities that we serve. And I think it's critically important that we continue to speak with a loud combined voice that suggests that this is one of our most significant areas of challenge for our nation and certainly for our communities in which we serve through our universities.
Absolutely agree. And as you were talking, Dr. Martin, you talk about using our voices and a collective voice, right? It just brings to mind to me, we'll have another election cycle coming up before we know it.
That's right.
And, some election cycles, we see a lot of engagement. Then the next election cycle, it seems like, it just falls off and we deal with that voter apathy, especially in the Black community. But I think, part of it is because people feel overwhelmed. I mean, life is moving at an incredible pace. People don't feel like they can get informed about all of the issues. Pick one issue. If it's the digital divide, reach out to your local representatives, to your state governor, to your county representatives and city representatives, and ask them what they're doing, how they're supporting solutions that address the digital divide. So find one thing, and you've heard from all the presidents about what a critical issue this is for success and access and equity, as they have all pointed out. So maybe this is your issue. where when you have an opportunity to engage with someone who's running for office, where you have an opportunity, even on social media, if it's not in person, ask them. Ask them to explain what their policies are, what their solutions are, especially as it relates to the HBCU experience and equity. We've got some great questions coming in live. Dr. Artis, I'm going to come back to you. This question is specifically for you. It's, by the way, from a Benedict student who is interning with Dominion Energy. So I know you're
Yay.
very proud. The question is this: as the first female president of the college, can you give insight about building empowering teams? How about that?
Well, I think so. I think the A team, as I affectionately refer to it, is a high functioning, high performing team. And the outcomes that we've been able to achieve at Benedict really is proof of that in many respects. I think you build a high performing team by investing in people, by listening, by engaging fully, doing a little less talking, a little more hearing, and really empowering people to take ownership of their respective areas, demonstrate their strengths. And I think through the provision of development opportunities, again, investing in our people and empowering them to do the jobs that we have tasked them to do is the best way to increase organizational effectiveness and to increase the individual efficacy on the part of each member of the team.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Martin, we have a question incoming for you from our forum today. So glad to have so many people with us this afternoon. This question says, as a proud 1987 North Carolina A&T grad submitting this question, what can alumni do to get involved and best support the student body? What a great question. Dr. Martin?
A great question it is, and we have had lots of discussions. We just had a forum with alumni of our university just this past Saturday, as a matter of fact, and then we're using virtual engagement of our alums even more progressively so that we can get a larger population. There are probably three areas that we continue to share with our alums. You have to fully understand the mission of our university and the role we play and the incredibly bright and talented students we serve. Writing a check that allows us to ensure that we're able to support the broad array of needs of our students, whether it be new technologies for virtual learning, or whether it be scholarship support or textbooks, or minimizing their debt to attend our institution, that's critically important. The second aspect of engagement is to share with our students as engagement through mentoring and exposure, either directly through our colleges and our deans, or through the corporations and organizations that represent, in opening doors for opportunities for mentorship, internships, cooperative education opportunities, and permanent employment opportunities. The third big area I would frame as needs for our alums to be engaged is to be visible in your communities, to be proactive and activist-minded, and serving as ambassadors for our university and HBCUs in general with your local and national leaders. We provide communications for you, letters that define the key messages you must convey to our outstanding alum, Congresswoman Elma Adams, who does remarkable work on our behalf in Washington, D.C. She needs to hear from you. She needs to know, one, she's doing the right thing, that she's celebrating the right kinds of areas of opportunity, the collaboration she's creating with the HBCU bipartisan committee she co-chairs, for example. We have to be actively engaged. Our alums have strong voices, and you should use your voices to open the doors of education and opportunity. As one of my board members said to me not terribly long ago, we have to tell our story, and we can't mealy mouse that story. We have to speak it loudly and clearly and collectively so people hear us. The evidence of our impact as universities collectively is no more visible today than it's ever been, with so many of our alums as HBCUs, Vice President Harris, to congressional leaders in Washington, to governors and lieutenant governors and legislators and corporate executives, people who can make a difference. Share your voice, because people are listening, and we need to engage you with the right messages to share with the appropriate constituents.
I think you've laid out some great opportunities. And you know what, when we talk about supporting our HBCUs, particularly from the alumni, I've got to let the other presidents weigh in on this, because I don't want y'all to miss this chance too. Dr. Adams-Gatson, I'm going to start with you. Just give me one specific thing that alumni or anybody who supports the HBCUs can do for your campus, your students, whether it's a financial donation, volunteering of time, or civic or social engagement.
So it's all of those things. And what I would say is our alumni are deeply committed to the university. They love the university. And as they are able to support the university financially, because in the end, we're talking about students who might not otherwise go to college were it not for the financial support that they receive. And then once they're here, we have the opportunity for those alum to come to campus and to interact with those students. We've got alums who have created programs in their organizations like Netflix, where we had a UX and coding program because an alum spoke up and said, I know a great place where you can get diversity. That's what they can do for us. That's a game changer for us.
Fantastic. Let's go next to Dr. Wormack. What is one specific way that people can support Claflin right now?
Are you referring to our alums or just in general?
Yeah, we'll start with the alums, but in general, whatever that need, the biggest need is, yes.
Well, I mean, I want to celebrate our alums. Our alums have been amazing. You know, we've had it consecutively a largest alumni giving. We're right now, we're at 41% of our alumni give each year.
Wow.
And if that's on a 5-year running average. So they're committed Claflinites, and I'm thankful and grateful for that. I think the piece that is most important for us is student exposure and access. And so when you think about when alums are in positions, I say all the time, what makes Harvard, Yale is their alums and their ability to get those students back at their institution, their alma mater, connected to networks. And so our alums allow our students to be able to get that same access and opportunities when they're sitting in these C-suites and when they're in these different positions to make sure they're the voice for the unvoiced. Because if we're not at the table, then we're on the menu. And oftentimes our alums are at that table to have the opportunity to share that voice to ensure that our students are there. So continue to be a voice for those that are coming behind you and continue to invest back into this fertile ground, provide access and opportunity so the students can have the same transformational experience, Claflinite experience that they had as well.
It was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Dr. Artis, what about you and the Benedict experience, and for your Benedict students, what would be the most impactful way for people to support right now, particularly alums?
So I think to be their very best. The reality is our alumni are really the exemplars. They're the ambassadors for the institution. They carry the brand. They go out and show the world what a Benedict College education can do, be, achieve, and give back. And our alums certainly do that. Benedict College is on its 7th year of consecutive $1 million plus giving. We're on track to $1.5 million this year, and we're very excited about that. So the best of BC alumni come through for us year after year after year. But my admonition to them is keep being the best you can be, because you are an exemplar. You speak for me, you speak for every student on this campus, you speak for this college and its unique history when you go out and represent us well.
Fantastic. We've got another question coming in that the viewer would like for each of you to briefly address. The question is, what is the biggest lesson learned for the college or university over the last year? So as you contemplate everything, all the challenges that you have overcome and, important issues that you are still working to address, if you would briefly share the biggest lesson that you have learned at your institution of higher learning over the last year. Dr. Adams-Gatson, I'm going to come back and start with you on that.
Thank you. The biggest lesson that I think we learned is the resilience of this institution. I say often that this institution was created during the Great Depression by just a group of community members, Black community members, who said this education and a higher education is so important that we're going to put our resources together, meager though they were at the time. But we're going to do that in the midst of a Great Depression to ensure higher education for our young people. If they could do that, we can survive a pandemic. It's been time of loss, time of pain, time of difficulty, but also time of resilience. And that only works if you've got great partnerships. So for example, Congressman Bobby Scott, who's the chair of the House Committee on Education and Labor, is a great friend. He's here all the time, visiting with us, talking with us, sitting on panels for us, asking us what's needed, what can we do to support? And that radiates across the campus, but across the nation. So where we have resilience and great partnerships, we are able to be successful, even in the midst of a pandemic.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Dr. Martin, let me go to you next. The biggest lesson learned over the course of this last year.
There are several, but I'll stick to one at this moment to be concise. We all realized as we have engaged with our students throughout this year in the midst of this pandemic, the high level of importance, just a real significance of getting an education, how important it is in the minds of our students and the families of our students, because they, in the midst of this pandemic, came to our university and abide by the most critical set of expectations, high levels of testing, going to class, wearing the mask, compliance, if you will, all in the name of staying committed and focused to completing their education at our university. We knew they were there because they wanted to be at an education, but it was critically evident that while other universities were pivoting to go to virtual fully and the like, our students stayed focused, stayed committed, and stayed engaged in the midst of all the challenges that they were experiencing. And we were elated to be able to provide for them the very best experiences we could afford in the midst of the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wormack. I'm coming to you next. You talked a little earlier about the big lesson you learned about not taking Wi-Fi and internet for granted, coming to Claflin to take over the reins of leadership. As you reflect over the last year, what has been the biggest lesson learned for you?
For me, it's been just recognizing how agile and the agility of this institution. It celebrates 152 years of existence this year, and to pivot on a dime, right? We have been known as a liberal arts institution, high touch, high feel. Everyone knew, you ask anyone here, it's a family environment. And so we were so used to that space, but to pivot and have the ability to be agile enough to still provide a outstanding transformational education experience at the drop of a dime, and so when we think about there's not this thing what HBCUs can't do. Anything we put our mind to, we can do. And so to shift the curriculum, and you think about looking at engaged pedagogy models, shifting their curriculum to say, hey, you want to make sure that the faculty structure and training happens in less than 48 hours to ensure when our students are on spring break for that to happen. So just to see the agility and the commitment and dedication from the everyone, that's from the housekeeper to the cabinet. Everyone showed the ability to be agile to ensure that the safety and well-being, and our statement has been since this pandemic had started, we wasn't in it to survive. We were going to thrive through the pandemic, and we have been able to do that on multiple levels. We didn't just survive, but we've been able to thrive. And that's, again, because of outstanding partners like Dominion Energy and others who continue to invest into fertile grounds at our outstanding HBCUs.
Outstanding. Survive and thrive. Dr. Artis, a perfect segue to Benedict College, and so much that you have endured and persevered and accomplished over the course of the last year. What's been the biggest lesson learned?
I think for us, the institution had a recentering. We knew who our students were. We understood our demographic. We knew the number of first generation, South Carolinians, low wealth, Pell eligible. But the stories, the human stories behind the students, the things that we learned, 31% of my students have housing insecurity. 12% of my students do not live in areas where there's broadband access. To really dig deeply and understand the challenges our students have to overcome, and to be able to amplify those stories in ways that capture the imaginations and the hearts and the minds of folks like Dominion Energy, who then help reinvest into these institutions to provide opportunities for these students is so critically important. And I think we recognize the challenges that our students have to overcome, but the pandemic created a set of circumstances where we had to delve much more deeply than we ever had before into the stories behind the names and the numbers and be exactly who we say we are. We talk about being familial. We talk about connecting with our students inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and holistically. COVID forced us to be what we say we are, and I think we stood up. I think the Benedict staff and faculty stood tall in this moment and really demonstrated that when we say we are the HBCU that put the BC in HBCU, we mean it, and it means Benedict cares.
Absolutely. And, you know, as I listened to you share those observations, it took me back to early on in the pandemic where students needed to get home and the community and your Benedict alumni donated money to make sure that they would be able to safely make it home to be where they needed to be while we responded to this crisis. I have another great question that has come in, just outstanding. I wish I could give a round of applause to everybody who's joining us on the forum today because you guys are really driving a great conversation. This question is for all. Dr. Womack, I'm going to come back to you to start with you and then work our way through the panel. The question is this: are there conversations about creating new social justice education related curriculums, and what would it look like to create that curriculum?
Wow, that's a great question. And whoever asked that threw me a softball. Thank you. The timing couldn't have been better. We are investment into the Orangeburg community. So on June 30th, we will be opening up a new center downtown Orangeburg for social justice. And our social justice center will be infused through our global education format. And so it'll focus on 4 major components. I mentioned earlier, I fundamentally believe healthcare disparities is a social justice issue. So we will provide the research components, hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, that's all impacting this region, and they're asking the why. And people, we talked about earlier, COVID-19 is killing African Americans at a significantly higher rate. And I fundamentally believe COVID's not racist, right? So what is the undertone piece that is there? What is the why? And we want to produce that why through our Center for Social Justice. Secondly, we are part of the prison Second Chance Pell program. We're one of the pilot schools. We're starting this Monday. We'll have 60 currently incarcerated individuals going after a bachelor's degree. And our first foundation course is African American Studies and Social Justice in America. That are courses that we're teaching with them in the prison. Our third component will be our focus on policing in urban communities and rural communities. So we'll offer social culture competency training, unconscious bias training. We'll offer all of those certificate and certification programs to municipalities all over the country where they can take advantage of that from an HBCU and get that type of certification. And infusing that into the work that we do. Student activism is a part of our DNA. We were founded in 1869, regardless of race, religion, background, open to anyone. And so that's been a part of our mission. We haven't wavered from it. And so the social justice component continues to be a thought leader in that space, but also be a part of the solution and not the problem. And so we want to produce the type of research and data that comes out of our center to be able to do it. And so significant investments that we'll need for that to happen to provide the type of research labs for that to be there. So
that is fantastic. Listen, you know, you got me excited. You're breaking news on our forum this afternoon. I love it. Make sure we follow up so we can have some coverage on WIS of these exciting initiatives of the Social Justice Center and the Cultural Competency Program and even the certification. I've got a brother-in-law who's a sheriff over in Georgia. So that's something I think that they should definitely look into taking advantage of. Dr. Adams-Gadsden, I want to come to you. Same question. Conversations about creating new social justice education related curriculums. What insights can you share with us on that front?
So we're pleased because Norfolk State University has the Center for African American Public Policy, and we call it Camp on Campus. And the center was created to address social justice issues. The Policy Center is a place where we have equity, fairness, understanding, and most importantly, creating solutions to be developed through dialogue and education. It includes NSU faculty, community leaders, use of force experts, NSU police, other members of the law enforcement. And one of the things that I want to say, first, I'd like to say thank you, Dominion Energy, for investing in CAMP. Part of the funding that you provided for us allowed us to extend some of the things that we needed to do in order to maintain that center and to do the social justice work. We're very committed to our students, faculty, and staff having the opportunity to engage in social justice. So camp is our primary way of doing that. The state has been very kind to us in terms of supporting it, and it was needed. So they needed to do that, and we appreciate it. But I would also say that allowing students to get engaged in social justice issues. We've had a on-campus conversation around just after the Chauvin trial on Black Men's Lives Matter. And that was a combination of Black men and from all walks of life, including our police force. There have to be those conversations, there have to be those ways of connecting that allow for social justice to happen, for us to understand what needs to change in the world. I have often said that if police departments across the nation came largely to HBCUs and found out how the policing is done in a way that is educational, supportive, and maintains safety, they would have a different way of doing policing, which would be community-based and much better at social justice that needs to happen nationally.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. Dr. Martin, would like to come to you now to see, in your mind, what would a social justice education-related curriculum look like?
We are a large public university, a doctoral research university. So we have a broad array of areas where our colleges are driving through our land grant mission connections with our community that are social justice related, whether that's creating through our Center of Entrepreneurship to create jobs in the community and building partnerships for helping stand up minority businesses in our community and help them flourish, to creating a center that we have today on cybersecurity, and again, creating technology related jobs and preparing graduates for the future, to 3 new centers that are emerging now out of our College of Education on social justice and education policy related that ensures that we better understand the challenges and deploy and educate individuals who fund K-12 education, but also understand the deficiencies in providing top quality education or leaders in our school districts to a social justice. And I think social justice centers have become the norm across many of our universities. And so the emerging Center of Justice in our College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And the final of these is a new center that supports health disparities in our community, where our local healthcare providers, health department, state Department of Health, for example, that have become much more evident as a result of lack of confidence in the vaccine, to ongoing testing and ensuring that our citizens in our community better understand and trust the science that supports medicines and getting access to health care. And through those investments, we've hired an incredible number of just really talented young faculty members who are helping us think through how we better understand these challenges in our community. And we stand up solutions, as my colleagues are defining, that our colleagues in our community trust. They believe the science, they believe the polling data, they understand the importance of registering to vote and getting out and vote. They trust school systems because the superintendent and the boards better recognize the needs of their children, our children in our communities and the like. And we have to take the lead in those discussions. And I'm proud to say that our faculty and staff are just exceptional in engaging in these discussions. Much more to share in that space.
Well, we appreciate that observation, and trust is so critical. And it's just an important reminder that trust is not built overnight. It requires an investment over time to build those bonds of trust so that when we do reach a critical moment where we need to respond to a pandemic, we have those bonds of trust already in place. Dr. Artis, I want to come to you, and our time is winding down. It's flown by so quickly. I want to get to another question and then our closing comments. But Dr. Artis, as you think about this idea of creating a social justice education related curriculum, what does that look like to you?
So Judy, I love this question. And more importantly, I love the answers, the diversity of the answers to the question, because it really demonstrates that HBCUs are not monolithic. We are each finding solutions that best serve our students, our communities, and our context. At Benedict College, we've gone a completely different direction. We did not create or stand up a new center. Rather, we chose to develop a very special course. It is a team-taught course by 3 faculty members, and the 3 will rotate on a semester basis. So our first semester, we had an English faculty member, a social work faculty member, and a criminal justice faculty member examining the prison pipeline, and more importantly, the families who are left behind and the challenges associated with being reintegrated into a society. The course filled up in 30 minutes, 60 students, and so in the second semester, we rotated the content. An English faculty member, again, the communication and critical thinking is important, and this time included an art faculty member to examine the ways that people of color are perceived and portrayed in popular media, in artistry, etc. And then added biology to think through issues of medical and health equity. So we're being current with the issues of the day. Our content will rotate again in the fall, and we find that embedding that into our general education curriculum, it is a critical thinking course. It will be a required course for all students at Benedict College, and the ultimate goal is to create an equity lens through which our students analyze and are able to articulate and advocate for the issues of the day. So it may be that we're doing runoffs and why that is still important in the next cycle of the course. And so our faculty are fully engaged. They are competing for the opportunity to teach in the course semester after semester. And so for us, again, it is creating a lens, a very holistic approach, and critical thinkers who can not only demonstrate, but who can advocate effectively and consistently for the issues that matter in our community. So incredibly proud of the work happening here, and certainly the work happening on the campuses that my colleagues all lead, and it really demonstrates the diversity of thinking and the strength of the leadership in the HBCU community.
I love it. Another question for all. We'll get. I hope we get through 2 final questions. So we'll just all be mindful of our time and try to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to share their thoughts and their voice. The first question: the social justice conversation, is it a movement or a moment? How can we keep up the momentum? Dr. Adams-Gaston, back to you.
It most certainly is a movement, but beyond that, it is a way of life that we are going to have to pivot to as a country. Really, the bottom line is we have to have social justice in order to move this country forward. What we are looking at is inequity that is long-standing and has had disparate impact on HBCUs. Right now, Governor Wilder, who was the first Black governor and the former governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and Secretary Dyke are looking at, with the monies that have been appropriated to the Commonwealth, to have $50 million each for each HBCU in this Commonwealth because of the historical lack that has occurred. That's transformational. And as we think about what it takes to get social justice, it's those kind of things that change the world, that change the environment, that give an opportunity that we have to be thinking about. And that's not a moment. That is a movement.
Thank you very much. Dr. Wormack, to you, how do we make sure that it's not a movement, or not a moment, I should say, but that it is indeed a powerful movement?
I just think we have to continue to be consistent. And I say, unfortunately, for me, I've been in this work. I was in Florida when the Trayvon Martin tragedy happened. I was in St. Louis when the Mike Brown tragedy happened. I was in Louisiana when the Jenna 6 situation. So I've been engaged in this student activism work for a very long time and been in the epicenter of all of those experiences. And unfortunately for me, it can't be a moment because I've been in it. This will be a long moment. Like it'll be something I'm trying to wake up from. But I think it's a movement, right? And understand there's many parts and to this piece, and all of us have a different role to play. And so I think about continuing, as Dr. J just mentioned, I think the economic impact is what matters, right? You know, to really even as Plainfield, there has to be a true financial investment of historic underfunding, under-resourced, not just HBCUs, but minority communities as a whole. And so for this movement to really manifest and transform into really what it's supposed to be, the financial investment matters. And so I think as we continue to think of strategies and we all play our unique roles in this movement, continue to keep the economic piece at the forefront, and why we can continue to do, as someone mentioned earlier, about punching above our weight. So in the business world, we think about the ROI. And so if you've been able to get those results with limited investment, imagine if you invest a little more. That's the ROI you're looking for. So it's not a moment, it's a movement, and continue to be focused on it.
Thank you very much for those insights. Dr. Martin, I'd like to come back to you. How do we hold on and harness the momentum that we see and feel right now to make sure that this is a meaningful movement?
Well, I do agree with my colleagues that it is indeed a movement. I believe that it's a movement as reflected by the groundswell of a very diverse group of very young people who are leading the protests or leading the conversations in very significant ways, and are growing in their impatience with the way change occurs. And we have to continue to ensure that these young people are continuing to gain the level of advice and counsel and education and preparation so their voice continues to have meaning and is being heard. And we'll continue to see organizations like Dominion Energy and leaders like Bob Blue making conversations and commitments to organizational values that say this is important. The evidence is shaped by our actions, not by our words. And you see that beginning to occur across a greater landscape of corporate leaders in our nation as well, who are seeking to demonstrate that they are looking to see evidence of change. And I think how we continue to see this can be a continued movement is through the continued investment in the young people we serve, and continue to ensure that we are setting expectations that there are changes occurring, there are outcomes that demonstrate that progress is being made and being made in a more expedient way. And so I'm confident we will continue to see this movement taking on even more shape and gaining more momentum.
Thank you very much. Dr. Artis, coming to you for the final response on this question, how we can ensure that the movement maintains its relevance and its impact.
So ditto, 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 my colleagues, sustained strategic investments in proven strategies to create equity, equality, and opportunity. Chancellor Martin mentioned earlier the business incubator, the entrepreneurship center that he has. We have a women's business center and a business development center. Building and investing capacity building entities that allow generational wealth development, that allow creativity to grow, to take root, and that these students can see and feel. We are behind them, we support them, and the dividend, quite frankly, endures to the benefit of partners like Dominion Energy, because you are going to get young people like the young lady we heard from earlier from Benedict as both interns and ultimately as employees and as innovators who help strengthen your companies and our country.
Well, our time has wound down. I cannot believe how quickly this conversation has gone by. I want to thank each of you. I said it at the beginning of our forum today, but it is worth saying again and repeating that it does require a unique brand of leadership and a certain kind of vision and commitment and passion and dedication to really lead an HBCU in excellence. And we see that in each and every one of you, your strengths and your talents that you bring to bear, all for the investment and the well-being of our HBCU students. So we cannot thank you enough for your time and your talents that you invest, not on their behalf, but on the behalf of our communities as well. If I can have a moment of personal privilege, we have a great question that slid in kind of under the deadline. I'd like to assign our HBCU presidents a little bit of homework, if you don't mind. The question is, we are approaching a very important date in our nation's history, Juneteenth, and we just saw the movement of the legislation on Capitol Hill. This viewer would like to know, would you please touch on the significance of how that relates to the current social justice movement, Since we don't have time in our forum to tackle that question, but since it is so relevant and topical to what's happening right now, and we want to focus on action, if each of you would be so kind as to address that question on your social media platforms. So we'll take our audience from this forum to move them to your social media platforms to make sure that you're following each of these universities, North Carolina A&T, follow Benedict College, follow Claflin University, follow Norfolk State University, and all of our dynamic presidents. But if you'll go to their social media platforms to see their responses, that question once again, the significance of Juneteenth, how you would relate that significance to the current social justice movement. So I want to thank each of you for taking that homework assignment on. We want to thank Dominion Energy, particularly the chair, president, and CEO, Mr. Bob Blue, but really the entire Dominion Energy team for all that you have invested in the HBCU Promise. We issue a challenge to our other corporate partners and stakeholders in our community. Find out what your local HBCUs are about. Talk to them about the challenges that still need to be met, and find a way, find your avenue where you can be a part of the solution, so that we take all of these great ideas that we have tackled and talked about today, and that we see meaningful action that has the result of impacting lives and allowing all of our HBC students to fulfill their God-given potential, to lead and succeed, and most importantly, once they hit those objectives and see their dreams come true, to have them come back and do the very same for others. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for your service to our country, to our states, to our communities, and thank you all for joining us for this HBCU Promise Forum today. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. Thanks, colleagues.
Thanks. See you later.
It's good to see everybody.